Hi friends, you're listening to Things You Can Do, a podcast where each week I'll be sharing a different recipe for you to try if you're looking to improve your mental health and well-being. My name's Emily, I'm the host of this podcast, and on today's episode I'm going to be talking about a recipe called Release and Respond, and how it can help you to develop a more loving and compassionate inner dialogue. Hi, welcome back to Things You Can Do. As I always like to do, I just want to start off by just saying thank you to anyone that's listening right now. Whether you are an old listener, a new listener, someone who has come back from future episodes, or if you're just starting your Things You Can Do journey right now, thank you so much for listening. It always makes this time spent feel so much more worthwhile. Just thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. So today I am talking about a recipe called Release and Respond, which is a really great exercise to do if you want to improve your inner dialogue. It helps to create a more loving and compassionate and understanding inner dialogue with yourself. It's a great recipe for just improving your self-love in general, which is something that I am going to talk about a little bit more later on in the podcast. Just self-love and what my kind of take on it is, how I think and feel about it, just in case it gives you any level of insight as well. But first, I'll just talk a bit about the recipe. So, this recipe comes in two parts. The first part, release, is all about just getting everything off your chest that you're thinking and feeling, any problems that you're dealing with, any worries that you have, any insecurities, any judgments that you have on yourself or other people around you, all that kind of stuff that you hold in. And don't share with anyone else because you feel scared of what other people are going to think and feel. It could even be like goals that you have, your dreams, your desires, just everything. You get out onto this piece of paper. Don't worry too much about how well you write in the letter because no one else is going to see it. It's for your eyes only. And you could even just write a stream of consciousness if you wanted to, which is just writing literally whatever is in your head in that moment. So it could be, my hand is aching right now, and now I really want to eat some biscuits, and the lady at the shop gave me a dirty look earlier today. What the hell was that about? And wherever your train of thought goes, I've often found when I'm doing a stream of consciousness that eventually I make my way into the kind of like the stuff that sits a bit deeper in my mind, stuff that plays on my mind a lot, even if it's not at the forefront. It's usually ongoing in the background, and the process itself of writing can just be quite cathartic itself. So yeah, in the release stage, it's just all about getting everything out. It's about using this letter as a safe space to fully express yourself, without shame, without fear of being judged by other people, and just get it all out. Even just writing, sometimes the act of writing something down can feel like a release, like letting go. And sometimes things that you hold on to in your mind, it is enough to just write it down. So there's a lot of benefits just to the first part itself. The second part is the respond stage. So this is where it gets a bit more challenging because this is where we have to kind of face the parts of ourselves that we don't really normally like to look at. When it comes back to reading your letter, which, as you'll see in the recipe, I have advised to leave it for 48 hours. So you put it in an envelope, don't read it back. Either put it somewhere safe for 48 hours or send it to yourself in the post so you don't get tempted to open it sooner. And that really just allows you some time away from whatever you were writing about. Sometimes you can forget what you put in the letter. I think time is, without sounding cheesy, it's a great healer. It offers you distance from your experiences, and so that you can reflect on them without being in the thick of it in that moment. So you've written your release. Sorry, you've written your release. You've put it away for 2 days, and now comes the time to open it and read it back. And this is the challenging part, because if you're like me, when you read back something that you've written, you're more than likely going to be quite critical of yourself, quite judgmental, and just the stuff that we can say to ourselves in our head can be quite cruel and mean and unforgiving. And so the idea of the response is to really be conscious of how we are responding to ourselves when we read the letter, and then try to consciously insert more loving, compassionate, understanding responses to ourselves into the letter that we write back. So we think about, where can we have more compassion for ourselves? What are some loving words that we need to hear? Where can we have a little bit more humor? Like, are we taking ourselves too seriously sometimes? Probably. Where do we need to hold ourselves accountable? Just because we're suffering or we're in pain or we're not happy doesn't mean that we have the right to treat people badly or to behave in certain ways. And when you're in the thick of feeling like that, sometimes we justify our actions with the pain that we're feeling, and it's a great time to hold yourself accountable for actions that aren't okay. What advice do you need to hear? Um, it's really, really powerful when you learn to listen to the voice that's deep down inside of you that knows what you need. Maybe you're always searching for the answer in someone else. Maybe you're always seeking advice from other people. But sometimes we know exactly what we need. It's just about learning to find that voice within ourselves and listen to it. And so the response is just about practicing, using that voice that we have, finding that more loving and understanding and compassionate version of ourselves, and meeting our less desirable self with that more loving and compassionate self, and bringing them together, to so that the one can support the other. So I will just talk a bit about self-love and how I view it, because I think it's quite important to why release and respond works. So I think there's many different ways that we can practice self-love. Um, in life, we can do things like exercise. We can make ourselves look good by getting dressed in the morning, doing our hair and makeup. We can eat well. We can say it out loud and share with the world that we love ourselves, and make proclamations. And we can do all of these external practices that are acts of self love. But what happens when we don't do those things? What do you feel then? Do you still love yourself? If you have been doing really well at exercising every other day and your body's in great shape, but for whatever reason you don't feel like you can keep up with that and you miss a day, do you still love yourself? Are you still kind to yourself? Or do you meet yourself with a critical attitude? Why are you so lazy? Why can't you do what you said you were gonna do? We were doing so well. Why are we failing now? Like, what is the voice that you meet yourself with? Because when we have all these external self-love practices and they go away, what's really important is what's left, and how we talk to ourselves in the moments where we're not our best. Um, it's very easy to love ourselves when we are on top form, when we look great, when we feel great, when we know that we've been looking after our diet, when we're being our most productive, when we're contributing to the community, when we're doing all of these things that make us feel good and make us feel worthy and make us feel loved and everything else that's good in life. It's very easy to love ourselves in that moment. It's very obvious of all the reasons why we should love ourselves. But when those go away, that's where the true test is. How do you treat yourself when you are not your best? How do you treat yourself when your mood is low, when you're not productive, when you're resting and not exercising, when your hair's scraped back into a bun and you're wearing that stained oversized t-shirt? How do you feel about yourself then? um because it's in those moments that we actually need love the most. um and this is where the challenge is. So when you're sharing everything in your release and you're kind of letting all your less desirable thoughts and emotions out onto a piece of paper, being able to meet those with understanding, with compassion, with love, with grace is really a very powerful act of self love. It is being able to accept ourselves in the states that we don't enjoy being in the most. um, and I'm sure you've experienced it with friends when you see your friends are feeling low, like you automatically like pour more love into them. You want to care for them even more. You make more of an effort to tell them how much you care about them, how capable they are, how much you love them, and you use that force of love to keep them going and to to try and just help them get back to a place that feels good for them. And so this recipe is one that can help us learn how to do that for ourselves. So one last thing before I go on to the recipe is just that um, this exercise is also great for self-soothing. So if you're feeling heightened emotions, maybe you're feeling really sad and crying loads, or feeling super angry or anxious, and you've got this big buildup of energy that feels like it could burst at any moment, then have a go at writing your release letter. What I've often found with writing exercises, especially in moments of heightened emotion, is that the act of writing itself helps to calm my mind down. So I might have racing thoughts, and then as I'm trying to write, my hand can't keep up with the speed that my thoughts are going. So eventually, my train of thought tapers off, and it matches the speed that I'm writing. And it's just a really good way of kind of um, running running the energy out of your mind, and just letting it all out and letting it run its course, so that you can just physically calm down, take a breath, and then um, do whatever it is you need to do from there. So, yeah, if you are feeling heightened emotions, definitely try this recipe out. It can also be great for you to, once you've sold your letter off, wait until you're feeling better to read it back, like it's suggested in the recipe. But it can be really great to reflect on how you were feeling in that moment when you're calm, so that you can gain some insight into what your mind's doing in those moments. Um, and, maybe once you've kind of faced some of your thoughts and feelings and responded to them with compassion and love and understanding, it might support you. If you have that experience again, you might be able to cope with it a bit better, or you might not have that experience again because you might deal with some of the things that you need to be dealing with. So, yeah, it's obviously a great recipe for like developing self-love, but it is also great to use as a self-soothing technique if you need to find a way to calm down your mind and your body and your emotions. So, on that note, I'm just going to go on to read the recipe for you. Release and respond. First, make yourself comfortable and sit down to write yourself a letter. Empty as much of your mind as you can onto the paper. Write about worries and insecurities you have, fears, problems you are facing, goals, dreams, desires. Get everything off your chest. Do not read back what you have written. When you're finished, seal it in an envelope and put it somewhere safe for 48 hours or send it to yourself in the post. After 48 hours, choose some time where you're feeling calm, open your letter and read it. When you feel ready, write a letter in response. Try to address everything that's been mentioned in your first letter. Think about, where can I show myself more compassion? Where do I need to take accountability for my actions? Where could I have a little more humour? What are some loving words I need to hear? What reassurance can I give myself? So that was the recipe. I will just share a couple of tips with you, which I did mention earlier in the podcast, but just to reiterate them. When you're reading your letter back, try to imagine that a loved one has written the letter for you, and read it with the same compassion and understanding that you would have if it was them that wrote it. I find that we all have a much larger capacity for love and understanding for others that we care about than we do for ourselves. So it can be good to pretend that someone else has written it just so that we can take a step back from our own initial judgments and meet them from a different, meet that writing from a different perspective. And then the second tip is to just be mindful of how you respond to your own writing. Are you being judgmental, cruel? Do you feel embarrassed? And how can you counteract those responses in the response letter that you write to yourself? Where can you swap out cruel judgment for a loving word, or a feeling of embarrassment for some level of acceptance or humor? How can you kind of combat those initial responses with a new conscious response? So that was release and respond. As always, please let me know if you are trying out these recipes and how you're getting on with them. And if you want to message me, I am over on Instagram. My account is thingsyou_can_do. I share all the recipes on there. I do videos. I am venturing into lives, although I'm not sure how committed I am to that just yet. We'll see how it goes. And I am also going to be creating a Facebook page because I know that there are some listeners out there that don't have Instagram, which is fine. I am making my way towards you via Facebook, so you'll be able to keep up to date with all of the recipes and everything on there. And I think for next week's episode, I'm going to let you guys decide what I am going to talk about. There is a choice between two different recipes. They are both relatively quick fixes. So just quick things that you can do to get yourself out of a funk. Or to change your mood. So one is change your playlist, and so that's looking at how music can affect your mood. And then the other one is give yourself a hug, which is again like working on self-love, and it's a self-soothing technique. So I'm going to leave a poll on this podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, you can there should be the option to have a choice. And I'll also put a vote up on Instagram and keep it in the highlights so that you can let me know which episode you want to hear next. And yeah, I will leave it at that. Um, Thank you for listening. And I just want to share a win with you that the podcast that I recorded today only took me about 3 attempts to record it, compared to the normal like 20 bazillion takes of me trying to figure out what I want to say. So that that feels good for me. And I thought that I would just share it with you, since you're following me along on this journey. Um, yeah, so thank you. I hope you all have a good week. Let me know if you try this recipe out and how you get on with it. And take care of yourselves. Bye.